did you change any of the processes and or the cadences that as you coming into your role? For example, I want to share, like a long time ago, we were doing like, yearly planning, and then we changed it from yearly to planning to both yearly and quarterly, just so that we can tie the sort of the executive vision to sort of the team level of focus, and then you go to the scrum, so there's no gap in between. And then implementing things like quarterly, bi-weekly check-in with the cross-functional team. So do you establish some sort of playbook? I think a lot of members here kind of want to know what works best in terms of cadence, and what do you change some of them? So maybe I start with Jackie.
Sure. Yeah. So we kind of started from scratch because the product org was so new at Tealium as well. So there weren't any formal planning cycles. We did our first planning cycle, and it was a yearly one. And we have these big bets. So we've done quarterly planning, but not much has changed. So we haven't needed to get more rigorous or more frequent yet, but that's kind of changing now because we're getting over the hurdle of these bigger things that we were needing to get through. And we're recognizing that we really want to be having these conversations ideally on a monthly basis. So we kind of went from yearly to quarterly, and now the next push is monthly.
Right.
So I believe the name of the game is rigor, as Jackie has said it. So the 6 product directors at AppDirect, they've done an excellent job at setting up like the first version of these monthly cadence, like quarterly planning and monthly updates. Where I come in and can deliver value and have already started to make recommendations is tying the data back. So if we had, for example, 10 interruptions to the roadmap, I want to know where these interruptions came from and how can we avoid them, because interruptions to the roadmap is what you want to avoid. And for example, going into Q4 planning, it's taking place starting next week. It's what % of the roadmap do we leave open to address technical debt, to address urgent escalations that come in from customers, something that broke. So it's making small recommendations with the buy-in of the right people. Otherwise, if I come in with my entire, like what I had envisioned early on, I'm not sure how well received that would be. But one other change that I'm recommendation for Q4 product roadmap presentation is, instead of speaking about the functionality of a feature, let's talk about the value to the not just the end user, but like by persona. So we have features that impact the marketplace manager, features that impact the software developers, features that impact the end user. So let's talk about the value to those personas instead of like, this is feature A, this is feature B, this is feature C. So it's also how we're presenting to our customers that I'm making recommendations.
I would add to that on the roadmap side of the interruptions to the roadmap. Of course, we always want to avoid them, but we never do, right? So another thing that we have been trying to focus on is how do we empower the product managers to have all the data that they need in order to make those trade-off decisions and communicate that out and re-baseline expectations based on that. So what's the information and the data they need, and what's the platform they can use in order to do that as quickly and easily as possible has been a focus as well.
Yeah, I think actually you guys both brought up some very interesting conversation. I want to just kind of put a little color that I had. Before, we definitely want to have, somewhat of a commitment, especially in B2B company, right? So you have lots of customer commitment, you have market commitment, so that having a roadmap that would help to fulfill that is important. But on the other hand, we also know that market's changing quickly. We never can be so sure about what's going on. And then sometimes things just take longer or something come up. So having that, I think what both of you are leading to is that one is understanding when that happened, understanding what's the implication, understand the root cause of it, so then we can make informed decision on, should we make the change? Is it for the better? What we are trading off, because obviously we are trading off. So having an informed decision making, that is really important. But at the same time, just by understanding that, it will also help us in the future to say, how much we should leave room for it, right? So instead of become a disruption, but rather than it's become something more saying, hey, we have a way to preserve for changes, so we know that things coming over time. And then the other thing I want to highlight that I'm hearing from both of you, I think is really amazing, is the change on how we think about product features that definitely has gone through over the years. I'm not saying product managers not think this way, it's just not necessarily getting into the habit of communicating this way, right? So every feature is for business, for our customer needs. And I will also even like elevate that further to say, not only just for customer needs, also for the business, right? So every feature is built by default for the customer personas and whatnot, and also tied to somewhat of a company focus and business goals. So having that ability to tie them together, one is to get people to understand much better with the context. It also helps a lot in cross-team dependencies.